Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrea. It's great to see you all here this afternoon. I hope we'll see much more of you over the next couple of months. Plant Power Metro New York, for those of you who don't know us, is a community organization that provides education, resources, and support for plant-based nutrition. We're so pleased to be here today to present this nutrition program with Riverdale Senior Services. Today, you're going to hear back-to-back speakers about nutrition through the lens of plant-based nutrition. Dr. Sapna Shah will speak about the evidence for plant-based nutrition, and then Chef Brandi Cochrane will inspire us with how easy it is to shift your kitchen into plant-based mode. This, as Barbara and Andrea have mentioned, this is a kickoff for our Food for Life program. The Food for Life program is a 4-week series of 2-hour sessions, each of which will provide a deeper dive into how a healthy plant-based diet can address the various chronic diseases which we all face as we're aging. Diabetes, cancer, heart disease, high blood pressure. Each class features a cooking demonstration led by one of Plant Power Metro's top cooking instructors. And each cooking class will be at least an hour. The cooking portion is at least an hour long, where you'll see at least 3 dishes demonstrated. And each class is interactive. We have lots that will be going on in the class. So people tell us the 2 hours flies by. People usually want to stay longer rather than not. So we hope you'll join us for these classes. To sign up for the Food for Life classes, we will ask that you'll fill out a questionnaire that'll help us understand your interests and your needs. And Margie is going to be sending the link to the questionnaire in an email, I think later today. So let's get started. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Shah. Dr. Sapna Shah is an assistant professor at NYU School of Medicine and a practicing internist at Bellevue Hospital in New York City. She teaches residents and medical students, as well as sees her own patients in one of the country's oldest safety net hospitals. She's passionate about plant-based medicine and works in Bellevue's plant-based lifestyle medicine program, where she helps patients regain control of their health using an approach that centers on healthy eating. You'll have an opportunity to ask Dr. Shah questions at the end of her talk, but if you have questions as we go along, please feel free to put them in the chat so you don't forget them, and we'll be sure to address them at the end. So, Dr. Shah, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Lynn, for that introduction. Thank you so much for having me here at Plant Power Metro New York, and thank you so much for Riverdale Senior Services for hosting this amazing event that looks like it's packed with amazing activities and lots of education and fun activities with cooking classes as well. And so without further ado, I'm going to start. So I'm just going to give an overview in the next half an hour or so of why I use food as medicine, and why I'm so passionate about talking to my patients about how essential food is when it comes to preventing chronic diseases and treating chronic diseases. And I wanted to start off with one of my patients, actually, this is now 10 years old, because this is when I first started using food as medicine. And I had already been taking care of him for a number of years. He was at that point a 48-year-old medical assistant who had diabetes for several years, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and obesity. And over the years, his diabetes had been progressing, and he was requiring increasing medications. And I wasn't surprised at this, because this is what we're taught in medical school and in residency, is that diabetes is this chronic progressive disease, and eventually people will go on to need more and more medications, to the point where many people will require insulin if they have advanced diabetes. So I wasn't surprised when his diabetes was not controlled. His A1C was 10.2%, which is an indication that it's not well controlled. You usually want to see that number less than 7. And he agreed to start insulin at that point, and quite reluctantly, but he did agree. And 3 months later, his numbers were much better. His A1C was now better controlled, 7.6%, which was closer to our goal. But he was on 4 medications, 3 oral medications, including Amaryl, Actos, and metformin, but also insulin, which he had started and had increased to 20 units a day. His cholesterol was well controlled on medications. Off medications, it was very high. And his blood pressure was well controlled on medications, lisinopril 20 milligrams. And I was quite happy with his numbers because all the numbers are good, but he really wasn't happy. He didn't want to be on medications. He didn't want to be on insulin, especially. And he was quite young. So he, as happy as I was, he was like, Doc, do I have to be on insulin for the rest of my life? And lucky for him and lucky for me, I had just finished reading a book on how food can be used to reverse diabetes. And so I shared with him that information that I had that I'd gotten from the book, and shared with him the book, and just gave him some quick pointers that I had gotten from the book, which is that wherever we can try to eat more plants in our diet, we will do better in terms of treating our diabetes. And so I just made some recommendations, and 3 months later, he came in for a follow-up appointment. He took my hands in his, and he just was jumping up and down, saying he'd never felt better. He had lost 30 pounds with making just the dietary changes alone. And he just felt so energized. He wanted to start going back to the gym. And his lab test showed that his A1C was now in the pre-diabetic range, off of any insulin, off of Amaryl, off of Actos. He was only on 1 medication, metformin, for his diabetes now. And his cholesterol off of medications was 130, which is better than it had been on medications. And his blood pressure was controlled on half the dose of his medications. And he was ecstatic. I was actually equally ecstatic because he was one of the first people that I started talking to about nutrition when I learned how powerful it can be. And I had already been in practice for many years, but since we're not taught in medical school that much about nutrition, nor in our training, we're taught a lot about medications and procedures, but not as much about in terms of prevention. I was just so thrilled that this actually worked, and I started talking to more patients and had many more examples like him over the several years after that. I just wanted to make a point, actually, that if someone is on medications for blood pressure and diabetes, and they start making changes to their diet, like the ones that we're going to talk about in this program, it's really important to monitor your blood pressure and your sugars, and to make any medication adjustments with the help of your provider, so that nothing goes wrong. So I just wanted to give that caveat. I was really thankful for this patient because he really he was an example of just how important food choices make an impact on our health. And actually, I think it's really underestimated how much diet plays a major role in many of the chronic diseases that we see in this country, including heart disease and cancer, which are our number 1 and 2 killers in this country. It's a huge player in strokes, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, obesity, high blood pressure and high cholesterol, and chronic kidney disease. And if you actually look at all these diseases, these are just the same diseases that put one at increased risk of having severe COVID as well. So if we got a better handle of these chronic diseases, we might actually have a lower risk of having severe COVID-19 as well. And if we look at what is the most important risk factor for dying from a chronic disease, actually at the very top is diet. Diet actually trumps tobacco use, blood pressure, and other risk factors in terms of how important it is in terms of contributing to chronic disease. So, diet is not only plays a major role in all these chronic diseases, but it's the most important risk factor that we have to address. And it can be really confusing because I feel like every year there's a new diet that's out there. There's the keto diet and the paleo diet and the low carb diet. And so a lot of people are very confused as to which is the healthiest diet that is out there. So lucky for us, like a couple of years ago, nutritionists and researchers, environmentalists, policy people, food policy from all around the country, from all around the world, actually, the leading researchers got together to look at the evidence to see what is the healthiest diet to keep people in this world healthy and also keep this planet healthy. And this was a recommendation actually that they made after they had convened. And they recommended that if we were to look at a plate, how would our plate look that would give us the most optimal health? It would look like this on the right, where half of our plate should be vegetables, And on the other half of the plate, we should be really consuming whole grains. Our protein should be a plant source protein, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. And our oils or fats should be coming also from plant sources to make sure that they're unsaturated sources of oils. And then, so you see that those are the major slices of the pie on the right. And then there's slivers for added sugars, animal source foods, dairy foods. And that was because they really wanted us to de-emphasize these foods and really try to avoid these added sugars and animal foods and highly processed foods, because they actually don't contribute to our health. They take away from our health. So this is how what they recommended the healthiest plate would be for people. And actually these, this was a global convening of experts. And that actually also is in alignment with all our own national US experts, the American Heart Association, American Association of Clinical Endocrinologists, Institute for Cancer Research, the leading Academy for Dietitians and Nutritionists also have the same recommendations, where we should be eating more of a plant-based diet. And so how good are we in terms of eating a plant-based diet now? This is how our the calories are, the typical calories consumed by Americans on a daily basis. So if you look at the largest slice of the pie, where are most of our calories coming from? 56% of them on the bottom are coming from processed foods. These are the foods that have added fats and oils, sugars, and refined grains, and that's what makes them processed. So that's where the majority of our calories are coming from. Then on the right, a third of our calories are coming from animal foods: meat, dairy, eggs, fish, seafood. And the reason you want to limit this is because of the cholesterol and the saturated fats that are in these foods that increase our risk of heart disease and diabetes and vascular disease. So you see that 89% of the food is actually coming from foods that are not actually going to be contributing to our health. And let's look at this green corner, the little sliver of the pie at the top left. Basically, only 11% of our foods are coming from plant sources, which are the vegetables, the beans, peas, lentils, nuts, and seeds, and whole grains. And actually, look, only half of those are coming from whole plant foods, because in this 11%, half of it is actually potato chips, because it's potatoes coming in the form of potato chips, and the nuts that they find in candy bars were included, and apples and apple pie was included. So we know that that stuff is actually not healthy for us. So if you really wanted to look at what percentage is coming from whole plant foods, only really 5% of the calories that we consume are really contributing to our health. And the rest of it is really taking away from our health. And so when you translate that plate, when it talks about whole grains and plant sources of protein and plant sources of fat, what does it mean? It really translates to eating more plant-based foods. And these include beans, lentils, and chickpeas, which are excellent sources of plant proteins, whole grains, such as oats, brown rice, quinoa, whole wheat. And these are also sources of protein, but also excellent sources of fiber, as is beans, lentils, and fruits of all kinds, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. And they really wanted to, what do we want to de-emphasize in our plate is eating less animal-based foods and highly processed foods. And the definitely ones you want to avoid are the processed meats, which are the bacon, sausage, ham, cold cuts, etc. By definition, processed meats are meats that have been salted, preserved, smoked, cured. And the process by which this is done actually is, it makes it even more harmful for our health. And processed meats not only contribute to cardiovascular disease, but it also contributes to cancer as well. We also want to cut out as much as we can beef, pork, and lamb. These are red meats. Chicken and fish, you really want to limit as well. And this is always tricky because while it is better than processed meats, and so people think it's healthy, if you actually can substitute it for the foods on the left, you'll even find more health gained. So if you had to have meat, poultry and fish is healthier than processed meats, but even healthier than poultry and fish is the foods on the left-hand side of the column, which are healthier sources of protein, because it's protein mixed with fiber and not any of the saturated fat and cholesterol that you'll find in the foods on the right. You also want to eat less dairy products, less eggs and less ice cream. Again, these are the highest sources of saturated fat in the American diet, and that's what's contributing to the heart disease and insulin resistance and diabetes in this country. And we really want to take out as much as we can the processed foods, the white breads, the crackers, the bagels, the donuts, the white rice. This is the foods that not only increase the amount of calories that we're eating, because oftentimes you don't feel full eating a normal amount of, you won't feel full on these foods, but it's also just a lot of the nutrients have been stripped from these foods. And obviously, all the added sugars and chips and candies and snack foods because of all the extra calories and the risk of diabetes as well from eating these high sugar foods. So, what does a plant-based diet actually help lower your risk of? Well, it definitely has been shown to reduce your risk of heart disease. And if you have heart disease, it's even been shown to reverse some of the heart disease if you stick to a whole food plant-based diet, which is really exciting because even medications don't reverse the disease, it just slows the progression of heart disease. So this is incredibly exciting if someone has heart disease to know that your health is actually in your hands and by the food choices we make. High blood pressure can definitely be treated with eating a plant-based diet, as well as high cholesterol. Type 2 diabetes improves on a plant-based diet. You can reduce cancers on a plant-based diet. Inflammation goes down. So a lot of people will have less pain and more energy on a plant-based diet. Constipation and the complications of constipation, like diverticulitis, GERD, abdominal pain, will all improve by improving the amount of fiber in your diet and reducing the constipation. And a plant-based diet, those who follow a plant-based diet have been shown to have the lowest weights overall. Chronic kidney disease also improves and can be prevented on a plant-based diet. And then I just wanted to put as a little reminder for myself that brain health is really important. And especially as we're all getting older, we really want to make sure that we enjoy our years with as much vitality and with the independence that we had when we were younger. And our brain obviously is very important to this. It's a very vascular structure and it consumes a quarter of all of our energy, this tiny organ over here, and up to half of the oxygen that we take. And it requires really good circulation to bring the fuel up to the brain and a lot of antioxidants to treat the inflammation that's ongoing in our brain. So what are the foods that can do this? It's a plant-based diet. Oftentimes we think that if we have a history of strokes in our family or Alzheimer's, that our genes will determine our destiny, but we know for sure from a lot of the studies that while our genes might put us at increased risk, it's our lifestyle that plays a huge impact and actually is more important than our genes in terms of determining our whether we come down with diseases or not. 3/4 of strokes can be eliminated by making healthy lifestyle choices that include not smoking, exercising regularly, and eating a healthy plant-based diet. And just a note that for every 7 grams of fiber that we eat a day, you reduce your risk of strokes by 7%. And fiber is only found in plant-based foods. Even Alzheimer's, something that I think a lot of us used to think that it was just really mostly genetics that determine Alzheimer's. Even this can be reduced by our lifestyle by 50 to 90% based on following a healthy lifestyle that includes a plant-based diet, moving regularly, making sure we're sleeping well, that our stress is managed well, and that we're connecting with others. So these are all very important aspects of lifestyle to focus on. And this is just there's so many reasons why a plant-based diet works, but I'll just touch on some of them. But first and foremost is fiber. It's fiber only comes from plant foods. And we used to think fiber was this inert substance that just really helped people move their bowels. But we've learned over the last decade that fiber is actually incredibly important for the functioning of our, to get healthy gut bacteria. And that's bacteria that live in our colon that actually, if you have healthy gut bacteria, it'll promote a healthy metabolism. It'll decrease the inflammation in our bodies. It improves our immune system. Actually, like most of the immune system resides in our gut, and that functioning of that immune system relies on that gut flora being fueled by plants. So Fiber is incredibly important for that reason. Also, if you're someone who has diabetes, fiber actually reduces the absorption of the sugar into your bloodstream. So it doesn't get absorbed rapidly into your bloodstream. And it makes you feel fuller. And then that fiber gets eaten by like that gut bacteria and produces compounds that actually work like our diabetic medications to improve our metabolism. So fiber is it's very an extraordinary substance that you find in plant-based foods. Plant-based foods like fruits and vegetables are also very high in antioxidants, and our body is constantly undergoing chemical reactions that produce these reactive substances, and we need to constantly give our body the fuels it needs to treat that inflammation. And antioxidants is where antioxidants, the vitamins and minerals that you find in plants, are what helps to reduce that inflammation. A plant-based diet works because it has plant protein, which studies have shown that if you get your protein from plant sources, you actually, as opposed to animal sources, you actually reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease and have a better mortality. So anywhere where you can make any replacement of your protein source from an animal source to a plant source, you will find improvement in a lower risk of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and living longer. So this is like, for example, switching from dairy milk to soy milk, or switching from chicken to chickpeas, or beef to beans. Anywhere where you can replace your animal source of protein with a plant source of protein, we find benefit. And the same thing with fats. If you can replace your fats that come from animal products with plant sources of fats, which are actually higher in monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, these are the fats that actually are very important to have in our body, and it's healthy for us. And anywhere where you can make that switch, better for us. The other thing another reason why a plant-based diet works is if you fill your plate up with all these plants, then you're eating less of the food that's high in cholesterol, and less of the food that's high in saturated fats. You're not going to be having as many added sugars, and we really want to avoid the processed foods as well. So that's part of the reason why a plant-based diet works, is it's high in these really good foods, and it's also replacing foods that are not promoting our health. And I just wanted to go over a little bit about insulin resistance, because it's a growing epidemic in our country. As you approach 65 years of age, 50% of 65-year-olds in this country have prediabetes, and another 25% have diabetes. That's 75% of individuals who are 65 or above who have either prediabetes or diabetes. And so what is fueling this, this prediabetes and diabetes is this insulin resistance. Our body is becoming more and more resistant to the insulin that we're making. Why is that happening? So first, we just have to understand briefly what's the role of insulin is. And normally when we eat, the digestive system breaks down the food, and that breaks it down into simple sugars that get absorbed into the bloodstream that then run around the blood. And that sugars that are in our blood need to be taken up by the muscle tissues so that they can be burned for energy. That's how our body works. And in order to be taken up by the tissues in our body, it needs insulin, right? Insulin has to be secreted. And so if you look at what's happening on a more microscopic level, if this is the bloodstream on the outside, and this is the inside of a muscle tissue, and this is the red particles over here on the right are the sugar wants to enter the muscle tissue, and it needs these little purple doors to be brought up into the surface of the muscle tissue to enter the muscle tissue to be burned for energy. And these purple doors get brought up once insulin is brought into this target right over here, the insulin receptor. And that insulin touches the insulin receptor, and it's like a key. It turns the door that brings these purple doors actually up into the surface, where the sugar can be brought into the muscle tissue. So when you have insulin resistance, something is not happening over here, where you have insulin being made, but it's not bringing these purple doors up into the surface to suck in that sugar. And what is preventing that insulin from working the way it's supposed to in insulin resistance? Why is this process happening where the doors are not being brought up so that the sugar can enter the muscle tissue appropriately? And that has to do with the foods that we're eating. A very large part of it has to do with the foods that we're eating. And if you think about what is more likely to cause insulin resistance, you look at the sausage link on the left-hand side, or 2 pieces of white bread. And you have to ask yourself, like, what do you think is most likely causing the insulin resistance? And keep that in mind, whatever your answer is. And I'll just go into a little study that this doctor did almost 90 years ago, or almost 95 years ago, where he took some medical students and volunteered them to either be put on a high fat diet, which is up over here, or a high carb diet. The high fat diet was basically for 2 days, he gave them oils, butter, mayo made from egg yolk, and 20% cream. So it was a really high fat diet for 2 days. These were healthy individuals before. And then he gave the other half of the people a high carb diet. He gave them candy, sugar, white bread, baked potatoes, like that, syrup. And after 2 days, he gave them a diabetes test. And if you look at this group up on top, this is the high fat group. Just after 2 days of high fat diet, he did a diabetes test and checked their sugars. And their sugars were at the level of prediabetes and diabetes just after 2 days of eating a high fat diet. You give this the high carb diet, the candy, sugar, white bread, which is not a healthy diet. I'm not endorsing this diet, but you give these medical students a high carb diet after 2 days, and look, their sugars, they're still able to process in the diabetes test. They give them a lot of sugar and they want to see what's happening to their blood sugar. Their blood sugars went back down to normal. So even after having a high carb diet after 2 days, it didn't precipitate diabetes as the high fat diet did. Again, I'm not endorsing a high carb diet that's like this, where it's sugar, candy, processed foods, because overall this diet is not going to promote health. It's a very inflammatory diet. But just you see what's mostly what is contributing to the insulin resistance and diabetes is actually the fat. And if you go back to this picture over here, for insulin resistance, it's the fat that's in our muscle tissues and in our tissues in general that are preventing the insulin from working. The insulin is hitting the target the way it's supposed to, except then it's all this fat inside the muscle tissue is preventing these doors from being brought up to take in the sugar. And then the sugar gets built up outside, the sugars start to rise, you start having prediabetes and then diabetes. And so what is the treatment? The treatment is really just taking out this fat from our diet, taking it out from the foods that we're eating, specific types of fat. The specific type of fat that causes insulin resistance is saturated fat, which is I'll go over where you get that from. But by taking out the fat in our diet, we're going to be helping to reduce insulin resistance. We also want to reduce any excess fat on our bodies, because that excess fat also can get into these muscle tissues and cause insulin resistance. So you want to be able to keep your weight at a healthy weight by eating healthy and exercising, moving regularly. So just to go into what are the components of a plant-based lifestyle. And here what we're talking about is, the fruits and the vegetables, the healthy proteins, healthy carbs, and healthy fats from plant sources. And I just want to go into a little bit on that. Let me see how much time. Okay. So for fruits and vegetables, how much is oftentimes a question. How many fruits and vegetables? Well, you should aim for at least 5 vegetables a day, fruits and vegetables. But the more you have, up to 10 fruits and vegetables a day, you will lower your risk of cancer, heart disease, and premature death. So anywhere where you can increase the amount, you see benefit. And you will see benefit up until 10 pieces of fruit and vegetable a day. Try to include a couple of servings of fruits and vegetables with each meal. And every serving counts, and really try to choose a variety of colors and fruits. And that is like, if you look at this chart that's put out by the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, every single color that comes from these fruits actually indicates specific phytonutrients that are really healthy for us. So for example, what gives watermelon and tomatoes its red color is the lycopenes. And lycopenes are really important antioxidants. They reduce the risk of certain cancers. The vitamin C, the beta carotene that you find in the orange fruits and vegetables support your immune system. The blue that you find in blueberries and plums come from a compound called anthocyanins, which are very anti-inflammatory. So you don't need to memorize any of this, but just know that as you eat across the range of colors and fruits, you're actually consuming a lot of nutrients in that way, that are boosting your immune system. And that's one of the reasons why when the American Institute for Cancer Research puts out their top 10 things that we should be doing to reduce our risk of cancer, included in that list is to eat mostly plant foods and to limit the amount of animal foods that we're eating and limit the amount of processed foods, because we know that it's in the plant foods where you have the most nutrients to decrease the risk of inflammation in the body. And so some people might say, oh, but carbs, we've been told not to eat carbs. And I think that the confusion here is that all carbs have been mixed together. People are confusing whole carbs that are the fruits and the vegetables and the beans and the lentils from the refined carbs. So they're, obviously the soda, the candy, the Fruit Loops is not what we want. It's not going to promote our health. It's refined sugars. They're very low. The refined carbohydrates are very low in fiber. They're low in nutrients. Everything has been stripped and it's very processed. So we want to stick with the foods that that are the whole foods that are on the left-hand side. And just to go over like what is a processed food, it's like you take a whole grain that's very healthy up here on the top left corner, and it's harvested. It looks the way it's supposed to with the grain intact. You have the whole grain kernels, then it's pulverized into wheat, and then you strip away the fiber, and in this process, a lot of the nutrients to get this refined wheat flour. And no one eats this. You have to add stuff to it. So you add either fat, sugar, salt, or food additives, and you get the final product. And that's this refined processed food is actually incredibly inflammatory. It's depleted of all nutrients, and it's very high in calories also. So it doesn't help us in any way. So wherever we can stick with the carbs from the whole foods, whole grains, better for us. And what is a whole grain? These are all the examples of whole grains. If you don't like oats, you've got quinoa, you've got whole wheat, you've got bulgur, corn, barley. These are all whole grains that are incredibly nutritious for us. And really try to aim for like at least 3 servings a day, like have whole grains with each of your meals. I think everyone is always asked, we're always asked this question when you're plant-based, like, how are you going to get your protein? Where is your protein coming from? And people are very worried that they're going to be very debilitated and have no muscles if they don't have protein, but everyone has enough protein. There's plenty of protein in all plant sources. And actually, like we mentioned before, that plant sources of protein are the healthiest proteins that you have. They don't promote inflammation, and it's what you need in the form that you can best absorb it in. So you get plenty of protein from all plant foods. You get them from all your legumes like beans and lentils and chickpeas. You also get them from your whole grains. Even nuts and seeds and fruits and vegetables all have nuts and seeds have a lot of protein. Fruits and vegetables even have protein in them. So everyone gets plenty of protein. No one is deficient in protein. Our strongest animals are all mostly plant-based. Elephants, ox, huge gorillas, they're all plant-based. And really try to aim for like 3 servings or more of legumes a day. So that's, if you think about it, it's like if we're saying 3 servings of whole grains and 3 servings of legumes a day, you really want to get whole grains and legumes in every meal, like with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then lastly, I wanted to just, kind of go over the healthy fats to get, where do we want to get our fats from? Just like protein, just like carbs, it's not all carbs are not created equally. All protein is not created equally. Fats also, you have your healthy sources of fats that come from your nuts and seeds, and that are high, there are certain ones that are also high in omega-3 fatty acids, which we actually don't make this kind of essential fatty acid. And so we have to consume them. And a lot of people think you can only get omega-3s from fish, but actually fish get their omega-3 from plant foods that are found in the ocean. So from the algae and the plankton that's in the ocean, that's where they get their omega-3. So we can also get our omega-3s from plant sources. We can get them from walnuts, from chia seeds, flax seeds, hemp seeds. And you want to aim for a couple of servings of omega-3s daily. The unhealthy fats in the diet are the ones that come from saturated fats. Saturated fats are mostly in the same foods that you'll find cholesterol, like in the processed meats, the red meats, the poultry, and the dairy products. But you also find saturated fats in coconut oil and palm oil. So you really want to avoid these oils when you're cooking. Unhealthy fats, these saturated fats, are what directly contributes to heart disease, strokes, and type 2 diabetes. So anywhere where we can replace that with plant fats, all the better for us. This is just 5 myths about eating plant-based. Some people are very worried, especially if they have diabetes or pre-diabetes, that fruits are dangerous to eat because it has too much sugar. But actually eating whole fruits has been shown to reduce your risk of diabetes. And if you have diabetes, the more whole fruits you eat, you have less risk of dying from complications of diabetes and having less complications in general from diabetes. Fruits are actually incredibly healthy. And it's a great source of fiber and plant nutrients. And it's just important to avoid fruit juices because that's where the fiber has been stripped out of it. And so then you rapidly absorb the sugars. Some people think that eating plant-based is more expensive. It's too expensive, but it's actually some of the healthiest foods out there are the least expensive, such as like rice and beans. And we would just say avoid eating a lot of the prepackaged convenience foods because those are the ones that usually cost a lot of money. Some people are worried that carbs might make you gain weight, and it's not carbs. It's just eating too much food of any amount can cause you to gain weight. But actually, if you eat a whole food plant-based diet and you're getting plenty of fiber, which is the one nutrient that everyone is deficient in. Only 3% of Americans have sufficient fiber in their diet. So if you are getting fiber, you'll actually fill up with fewer calories. And some people think you can't get enough protein without meat, but I just wanted to reassure everyone that that's just false. Most Americans, whether you're following an omnivorous diet or a vegan or vegetarian diet, you're getting plenty of protein. You just want to get your protein from a healthy source. That's the most important part. And you don't need a lot of vitamin supplements if you're going plant-based. The only thing I would say to be cautious of is making sure you take a vitamin B12 supplement if you're completely removing animal products from your diet, because B12 is made from bacteria that live on animal products. And so if you're not having any animal products, you're not going to have that production by the bacteria of B12. So you should get B12 1,000 micrograms a couple of times a week. And that's basically the most important supplement to take if you're following a whole food plant-based diet. I work at the Plant-Based Lifestyle Medicine Program with this amazing team of physicians and dietitian and a health coach who help people not only follow a healthy diet, but we also know that if you're stressed, if you're not sleeping well, if you're not moving, all these things contribute to inflammation in our body and chronic diseases. And so we try to address the whole picture here with not just, it's focusing on diet, on a plant-based diet, but we also try to address reducing people's stress and improving sleep and movement and connections that people can make, because we know that those are the things that really promote health and wellness. And just wanted to thank again Plant Powered Metro New York for everything that they do in the city to promote plant-based eating. And I would just check out their website. And you, of course, are going to be hearing a lot more from Plant Powered Metro New York and from the chefs about how to prepare these foods. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sapna. That was really terrific. And we do have a few questions for you. And I just would like to tell everyone that Dr. Shah is going to be leaving at about 2. So if you have any questions, please be sure to bring them up now rather than at the end. So first question is for you, Dr. Shah. Why is there such a resistance by doctors to taking you off a cholesterol and blood pressure medication, even when the numbers are constantly now within normal, citing other benefits of the medication? This person says she's active and makes nutritional choices to enhance this improvement.
I think that that's a really good question. Why are we hesitant to take people off of medications is a pretty valid point. I think that she makes a good point that there are other benefits to cholesterol lowering medications, separate from actually the actual numbers you get. It has a separate anti-inflammatory benefit. But I think that a lot of physicians are not even aware of the power of using a plant-based diet in terms of bringing down cholesterol and helping to reduce blood pressure. And so if they've never seen people actually lower their cholesterol substantially or their blood pressure, then they don't know that this is something that can happen. So I would say, working with your provider and making sure that that's what, that if you are someone who is going to be following a whole food plant-based diet, to monitor your blood pressure, monitor your cholesterol, and then make the changes with your physician.
Great. Someone asks, what if you cannot eat soy or gluten for health reasons?
Yeah, a lot of people have a gluten allergy that they just don't tolerate gluten. And so I would just, make sure with your doctor that is something that you actually have a gluten allergy. If that's the case, you should not be eating gluten because it'll be inflammatory. But that's really only a minor, very, 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 very minor percentage of people who actually have a true gluten allergy. And And so for the rest of the people who don't have a true gluten allergy, I would say it's fine to take. And it's actually very healthy to have whole grains and to have like whole wheat into the diet. But if you have a gluten allergy, then you do want to avoid wheat. But I show that picture of like all the different types of grains that there are. These are all the different whole grains. So, you know, if you have a gluten allergy, wheat has to be excluded, but there's a whole bunch of other grains that you would be able to access so that you don't have to worry. And then the other dairy. Oh,
yes, someone else has asked, what is the current thinking about the relationship between tofu and soy products and breast cancer, if any?
Yeah, so the American Institute for Cancer Research actually recommends eating unprocessed, that women should have a couple of servings of unprocessed soy products in their diet, because we know from studies that the more unprocessed soy women have, the less risk they have of developing breast cancer. And if you have breast cancer, if you're having unprocessed soy, which is in the form of tofu and tempeh and edamame, then you actually have a reduced risk of recurrence of breast cancer. So the reason for that is soy it has something that resembles estrogen, but it's a phytoestrogen. It's a plant estrogen that actually works almost to block the effects of estrogen on in the receptors in the body. So it actually works to reduce the amount of harmful estrogen in the body in terms of cancer risk.
Great. And can you talk about the value of this diet for type 1 diabetics? Obviously, type 1 diabetes can't be reversed, but it is helpful, is it not?
Absolutely. It's in fact, actually, we're now understanding that a lot of people with type 1 diabetes, which is when your body just doesn't make any insulin at all, also have type 2 diabetes as well. And that's when their body is resistant to insulin. So, you know, you can have type 1 diabetes and then you have to take insulin, but the amount of insulin that you're taking really depends on how resistant you are to the insulin that you're giving yourself. So if you have a lot of that saturated fat in your muscle tissue, you're going to need more and more of the insulin to inject. But if you take out those saturated fats from your diet, you're going to need the least amount of insulin. You'll still need insulin if you're a type 1 diabetic, but you'll need less of it because your body won't be resistant to that insulin.
Right. And someone asks, how can I get enough iron?
That's a great question. A lot of people are worried that if they're not eating animal products, they're not going to be getting iron, and then they may become anemic. But that actually isn't the case. You get iron from a lot of plant sources of food. So you get them from the legumes, nuts and seeds. They all have iron in them. So you can get them. You can get them from those sources.
Great. Someone else asks, says, I'm 73, have been healthy, balanced vegetarian for decades, but now have osteoporosis. So I've started eating cottage cheese and yogurt for the first time in my life. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so it's great that you've had the benefits of being vegetarian and taking out the animal products from your diet for so many years. That's wonderful. Actually, you know, to get your calcium, you can get calcium from plant sources. The same way that the cows would get calcium from eating greens, they would eat the grass and then their milk would have calcium in it. Nowadays, cows are not even fed, a lot of cows are not fed grass, and so they're fed a lot of soy products. Their milk is depleted of calcium, and so they have to have calcium added to the dairy milk, the same way that calcium is added to the soy milk or to almond milk or any of the non-dairy milks. So you can get your calcium through, the best way to get the calcium is actually through foods, and you get them through your greens, like collard greens, broccoli, bok choy, very high in calcium. Tofu that's set in with calcium is a great source of calcium.
Great. There are some other questions about sensitivities or inability to have certain substances like gluten or soy. Can you just talk about how the variety of the diet and how no matter what allergy someone has, there's something else here that they can substitute?
Absolutely. So if you have, like I said, if you have a wheat allergy, or if you have an allergy to one of the if you have a nut allergy, like, usually it's not to all nuts, it's to one specific nut. So you can see what other nuts you are able to consume. Same thing with a whole grain. Like if you have a wheat allergy, there's a ton of other whole grains that you can consume. Yeah, and if you have a soy allergy, you definitely don't need to have soy in your diet. You can have, beans, peas, and lentils from other sources, all the other beans, black beans, kidney beans, white beans, red lentils, green lentils, yellow lentils, like, a lot of other sources of legumes and a lot of other sources of whole grains that you can look for alternatives.
Great, thanks. And I think this is our last question for you. What are your thoughts on faux meat and faux cheese?
Oh my God, that's a great question. Explosion of faux meats and faux cheeses, like plant-based meats and cheeses. And I'm gonna give a kind of a nuanced answer. In terms of promoting our health, you want to try to stay away from a lot of these processed fake meats, because a lot of them, are very high in oils. And so while we're trying to reduce our chronic disease, like diabetes, by reversing it with reducing fats and saturated fats that you find in animal products, if all of a sudden we start consuming a lot of plant fats, like in coconut oil or palm oil, we're not really doing anything to promote our health. On the other hand, if you're going out once in a while and you're going out and you go to a restaurant and there's like a Beyond Burger, yes, once in a while, it's a good alternative. It's something there that you can try, but I wouldn't think of it as a health food. I would think of it as enjoyment kind of food that, you can have once in a while, but it's not going to be promoting your health. Same thing with like the faux cheeses, just to take a look at the ingredients and you'll see that a lot of them are very high in oils. So in terms of if our goal is to reverse chronic diseases, we really want to minimize those things that are going to take away from that from happening.
Great. And I lied. There's one more question, but I think you can answer this one quickly. What is your B12 recommendation? I think what this person's asking for is what type of B12 and how much should we take daily or weekly?
B12 is 1,000 micrograms of B12. It comes in like cobalamin or methylcobalamin, which is the more active form. But honestly, I think that it's fine to just take your cobalamin vitamin B12, 1,000 micrograms, and you want to take it twice a week. Your body only needs like 5 micrograms a day. So obviously 1,000 twice a week is way overboard, but we only absorb a very little amount of it. So that's why we want to make sure that we have enough, and anything extra that we take, we just pee out. It's not going to cause toxicity.
And I think we absorb less as we get older as well. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Shah. We'll let you go back to your patients. We really appreciate your being here. And if you'll share your screen before you leave.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Good luck, everyone.
Thank you. That was great.
Great. So we've learned a lot from Dr. Shah so far, but a lot of you may be thinking, well, how am I going to do that? So we have Chef Brandi on hand to tell us how to do that, and also maybe to talk about some of the substitutions that Dr. Shah talked about, because almost any recipe other than in baking, we can make all kinds of substitutions, a different bean, a different sauce. So we're excited to hear about that. Let me tell you a little bit about Chef Brandi. She serves as a culinary educator for Plant Power Metro New York, and she's the co-founder of Plant Candy, which shows communities and families simple ways to infuse more fruits, vegetables, and whole grains into their lives. Her commitment to helping people not only eat better, but enjoy it, challenges her to find ways to leverage flavor profiles and textures in natural foods that are familiar. Her personal mission is to help people take the guesswork out of eating simple, nutritious, and delicious food while having fun. So, Chef Brandi, take it away.
Hello, everybody. Yes, how are you guys this afternoon? So we just heard a lot about the benefits of a plant-based diet, especially one of the concerns that a lot of people has is the whole protein conversation. So I want to talk first about some of the simplest things that you can do to prepare your kitchen to be more plant-based. Funny enough, most of the things that we already have are plant-based. So a lot of times it's more of a mindset shift. So if we're thinking about the things that we have on the side, like our vegetables, our beans, our rices, that's actually already plant-based. So what I want to do is kind of talk through some things that we want to kind of have in our kitchen so that it's easier for us to stick to the lifestyle over time. So rice is something that is like simple. And if you now purchase, say, a white rice, switching over to a brown rice would be just the easy swap. I know I've heard a lot of people say that they do not like the taste or sometimes the texture of brown rice. So one of the things that can help you to enjoy it a little more is to soak it before you make it. So when you soak rice, it makes it a little softer when you cook it. So it will be closer to white rice. And also try a veggie broth to season it. So that's another thing that you want to add to your collection is broths. Those add a lot of flavor to your food, especially because we understand that, you know, if it doesn't taste good, it's going to be really hard to stick to it. And I'm of the belief that you can merge taste and health and they can live in one place. Another thing that we talked about were beans. Beans are something that are so simple, so versatile, so delicious, and they come in so many different forms. So dried beans are definitely something that I would highly recommend stocking your pantry with on your journey. And just like before, remember that beans can be seasoned the same way that you would season meat. So say, for instance, you have this amazing like pepper steak recipe that you season with peppers and onions and garlic and thyme, and however you do it, you literally can just swap out the bean, use that those same seasonings, the same veggies, the same herbs, and end up creating a pretty tasty meal. Now, the one thing about beans in a pack is that they're not as convenient because you have to soak them before you actually make them. So in addition, you also want to stock your pantry with dried beans, something that, not dried beans, canned beans, because these ones are already cooked and can literally create a really tasty, simple, inexpensive meal in a pinch. I have literally probably, I'm looking at my bean stash over there, like at least 4 or 5 varieties of canned beans at a time, in addition to the dried beans that I have as well. In addition to beans, I love to keep lentils around. And there's so many types, like red lentils, yellow lentils. I had some brown ones, but they're all gone. But the beauty of lentils is that lentils has such a close texture to ground meat that it is really helpful when you're making things like meatballs, spaghetti sauce, and you're looking for like that kind of ground meat texture, tacos, anything like that. And it's a great source of fiber and protein, which is one of those things, well, those 2 things that we want to always make sure that we get. Like before she said that protein was something that we're really concerned about, but it's really, as protein all over the place. Funny enough, when I was looking through my cabinet to show some things that you could just purchase, this is a blend of grains that happen to be like put together as like protein rich. And what's inside of this? Simply lentils, brown rice, and quinoa. So when we're concerned about protein, but it's really not something that we want to be concerned about. So definitely beans, simple grains that you can find anywhere. And another key to swapping over your kitchen is spices. Now, a lot of times people don't like food because they don't like how it tastes, but the only way food tastes good is if we make it taste good, right? If you take a piece of chicken and you put it in a pot of water and you boil it, you don't put any seasoning on it, not gonna like it. So the same thing's gonna happen if you take tofu, put it in a pot, don't put any seasoning on it. You take broccoli's a little different. I think broccoli tastes good regardless, so that might be a little different. But you know, there's some things that if you just dump them in a pot of water with no seasoning, you're not gonna like them. So remember, like, make this an enjoyable experience. You want to enjoy what it is that you're eating, because if you don't, you're not going to stick to it. So don't be scared of spices. I know on this Food for Life journey, they talk about we take out oils, we take out salts, right? So what do we do to replace those things? So definitely one of the spices that I love to use and recommend to have on site is cumin. Cumin is really, really nice. It adds a nice, like savory flavor is probably something I would definitely say. So keep that around. Smoked paprika, another another key in the plant-based kitchen arsenal. I always tell the story. Growing up, we didn't have smoked paprika. I'm not saying it didn't exist, but it never came into my house. We only just had regular paprika. And I thought paprika was just like this throwaway spice that only showed up to like garnish deviled eggs and potato salad. Hence, get into plant-based living and figuring out how do we add more flavor to foods and find smoked paprika. And it really changes your life. So it adds like this really nice meaty flavor, smokiness, and it's really flavorful. So I would recommend some smoked paprika. You can put it literally almost on anything, grains, beans. It's really yummy. Garlic powder, nothing fancy about garlic powder. It just adds, yet again, another layer of flavor without the salt. Onion powder is also going to be your friend when we're talking about not adding salt. It's something about onion powder that replaces the need for salt in a dish. So definitely add this to your pantry. And simple, good old pepper. There's a ton of pepper, but black pepper is something that literally just a little bit will change your experience with a dish. Now, another thing that I would also have you to add to your collection would be vinegars. Now, vinegars are something that I know, like I say, growing up, literally we would use white vinegar, apple cider vinegar, and at some point red wine vinegar showed up to the party. But when we're in this space where we're trying to figure out how do we continue to add more flavor to food without adding unnecessary fats, unnecessary calories, unnecessary random ingredients, vinegar is your friend. This is a red wine vinegar. I would say red wine vinegar, regular balsamic vinegar, white balsamic vinegar. White balsamic vinegar is, I love white balsamic vinegar. When I found it, I felt like I had been deprived for a lot of my life because it has like this nice, bright sweetness that's really cool. You could add it to a dish when you're looking for like a note of sweetness without actually having a sweet, because at the end of the day, it came from a grape, so they're leveraging that sweetness from that grape. So that's something to think about. Also, as we explore oil-free cooking, vinegar is going to play a huge role in that, especially when you are sauteing vegetables. If something sticks to a pan, you can use the vinegar to lift it off of the pan if it sticks. You can also use a little bit of broth like we talked about before, or some water just to lift it off. So vinegar and broth gives us continued layers of flavor. So that's why I recommend using vinegars and broth, but water will do just fine. And last, before I get into the cooking portion, I want to really encourage us to do frozen vegetables, like frozen vegetables. I mean, there's conversations about fresh versus frozen, but the one cool thing about frozen vegetables is, number one, they're frozen at the peak of freshness. And number two, they last longer than, say, your fresh vegetables. Now, I'm not saying don't get fresh vegetables if you can get them. But the thing about fresh produce is that it's more expensive. And if you don't eat it, you have to throw it in the trash. And who wants to throw things away, right? If you don't get through it as fast enough, it'll go bad. And that's the last thing we want to do, is waste ingredients. So I always say, like, keep something. My staples are, what is this? Spinach, green beans, broccoli. I also have some corn, and one of my new additions to my collection has been these sweet potatoes. And it's really just simple ways to make sure that you always have something quick. And these are great to mix in with your dishes. So say, for instance, you're making a rice and you want to add in some extra fiber. You want to add in some extra veggies. You can throw some rice and some corn and some spinach in with that. Say, for instance, you want to have some beans. So you make your beans, and then you can roast some sweet potatoes that you don't have to cut up and peel. And these are great convenience foods, because at the end of the day, if it's hard to make, it's going to be really challenging to stick to. That's why my key is always don't keep things in the house that are too easy. Like the stuff that's really not good for you, if you keep it in the house, you're going to get it, right? So if you have to bake a cake from scratch, you're less likely to have cake versus if you have to just go to the counter, slice a piece and eat it. So that's what I always think when we're talking about keeping our pantry stocked for success, right? So I want to share something really simple with one of my favorite ingredients, a chickpea. The reason I love the chickpea is that, number one, it's insanely versatile. It allows you to mimic multiple textures. And it is not, the chickpea doesn't have to be the chickpea from the salad bar growing up. Now, my experience with chickpeas as a kid is that they were the random things on the salad bar at like Sizzlers or something like that, that you just kind of throw on a salad, right? But the cool thing about chickpeas is that you can manipulate them and do fun, interesting things with them. So I'm going to show you 2 simple things that you can do with a chickpea. So I'll move my camera up just a little bit. Now, this is literally just a can of chickpeas. What I did with these chickpeas, I opened a can, I rinsed them off, I put them in this bowl, right? So this is going to turn into a salad. So what I do is I cut up some peppers, some onions, some parsley, and some red onion. So very simple, you know, nothing hard to find, just some simple bell peppers, a red onion, and some good old parsley. That's all we have here. Going to mix this in to the chickpeas. So already, first off, this freshness smells really nice, which is always a great part of food, like just kind of smelling it and experiencing it that way. And because we eat with our eyes, we always want to try to make things as colorful as possible, right? There's this whole concept of like eating the rainbow. And that is intentional because every color has a different nutrient that you get from it. So it's always nice to kind of have it. And then, like, yet again, the visual piece helps a lot too. So the what do you call it? The seasonings that I'm going to put into the salad, super simple. A little bit of cumin, a little bit of garlic powder, a little of our good friend onion powder, and I'm going to do juice of a lime. Now, if you don't have a lime, a lemon will work as well, but I don't know if you guys have noticed, but the price of lemons is kind of skyrocketed. So I have been kind of using limes interchangeably, and they're just as good. And the cool thing about lime, just a tip from a flavor profile perspective, is that limes activate the salt part of your palate. So if you're looking to cut back on salt, lime is a great way to do that. Acid in general, so you can get that same kind of experience from vinegar, but lime definitely plays that role, which is lemon's a little different, whereas lemon kind of adds a brightness to like the sweetness of a dish. So just a FYI. So literally juice of a lime, and then stir this up. It smells super fresh. You smell the herbs, you see, and this was simple, like literally, I don't even know if this was 3 minutes. I mean, granted, I did have the veggies already pre-cut. So if you had to cut the veggies, maybe it would have taken you 10 minutes all in, but a really simple chickpea salad. So I'm going to literally take the same ingredients and make a chickpea meatball, right? Another thing about chickpeas, which is really cool, great source of fiber, great source of protein. One of the things that we're always very, very concerned about in switching to a plant-based space. So we have chickpeas. What I'm going to do is just smash them with a fork. And the smashing with a fork is because we're manipulating them so that we can turn these to meatballs. Now, I have done lots of things with chickpeas. I've turned chickpeas into chicken salad. I've turned chickpeas into tuna salad. I've turned chickpeas into meatballs that you're going to see. So I really like I say, the versatility of them. They're really affordable, and they soak up whatever flavor you kind of put into them, which is nice. Now, the recipe that I'm working with now is really simple because I want to show you just how we could take the same ingredients and do different things with them so you don't get bored. But say, for instance, you wanted to add like some extra fiber or protein to this dish, you could literally throw a grain into this. So say you had some leftover rice, you could put that rice into this. Say you had some lentils, you can put lentils into this. You could even add oatmeal to it. And if for some reason you happen to have some chickpeas that were like a little wet and they weren't going to hold together, I would recommend adding an oatmeal to kind of act as your breadcrumb, which also adds some extra fiber and is a whole grain. So see, we smashed it with the fork. It's not like fully smashed. There may be still some pieces that aren't fully broken down, and that's totally fine. So what I did was same ingredients from before, but I sauteed the peppers and onions, and there's parsley here, right? We're just going to put those in to the mixture, and we're going to add in some spices. Of course, my Old Faithful smoked paprika came to the party. We're going to add in some cumin, which definitely gives us the whole meaty vibe, so to say. Garlic. We're going to go for onions, and we're also going to do some fresh black pepper. Now, I will say, when you're purchasing canned beans, whenever possible, you want to try to get no or low salt. But regardless of what you do, what you want to do is make sure you rinse and drain the juice that comes from the can. So that's something to remember. So then put those spices in. Yet again, smells good. Now, the reason that I saute the vegetables that are going into a meatball is that I feel like in the process of creating like a meatball, it just texturally works better than having like these hard, crunchy, fresh veggies in and not being sure if they're kind of going to cook down. In addition, cooking the vegetables also brings out like this caramelization and another level of flavor that we want to kind of have inside of the dish, right? So like I say, all we did, smash it, put in the ingredients, and then just like you would make a regular meatball, just roll it into a meatball. Really simple. I'll do it one more time just in case you didn't capture it. First time, literally super simple. Now you take these, you put them onto a cooking tray, you put them into the oven, and they come out like this. So literally simple meatballs. And these things can be used on top of a rice dish. You can put them in the pasta and put some sauce over top of them. You could potentially even have them as a side snack and like dip them in hummus, even more chickpea madness if you want to just go all out. But yes, so as you can see, another thing that I did not talk about as far as things that I would like you to keep in your kitchen, especially as we talk about sauces, is mustard. Like mustard is something that I really like, especially if you're trying to get rid of mayonnaise. Like say, for instance, you're someone who likes mayonnaise on things and you're looking for like that creaminess. Mustard does well. Dijon mustard, I think, does better than the other mustard if you're really looking for that creamy taste. So that's something I would say stock up on. Really inexpensive. Also doesn't have any added like oils or salt in them. And then tahini, another ingredient that is really good and useful as you build your plant-based pantry. So that is that's all for today. If you have any questions, let me know.
Chef Brandi, someone asked, what is the oven temperature and how long for the meatballs?
Yeah, so the oven temperature is on 400, and depending on how many, it's probably going to be somewhere between like 15, 20 minutes.
Great.
And yes, I saw the air fry question. Yes.
Yes. Could you talk about air fryers?
So air fryers are really cool. I don't really know why people want you to put oil in them. You don't have to. You could totally use an air fryer without the oil and get the same effect. And what air fryers do is kind of like a faster roasting kind of convection oven effect. So you end up getting the nice brown caramelization on things. So anything that you are looking to get like that crunch, that bite from, an air fryer can be a great alternative to fried foods.
Great. Can you comment on mushrooms?
In what way? I love them. I'm addicted to them. So I could talk about mushrooms ad nauseum. So give me some boundaries.
ML Platt asked, let's see. I don't know. What can you do with mushrooms?
All right, everything. So mushrooms. So mushrooms are an amazing source of the flavor profile called umami. And umami is something that we are accustomed to finding like in meat. It makes us just, it's like all the flavors together with like savory is like umami. And mushrooms have a great texture that mimic meat as well. They add flavor, they add kind of a saltiness, and they add and they add texture. So a lot of times the mushrooms that at least I know I grew up on, were those white button mushrooms that were pretty anticlimactic in my opinion. But if you want to venture out of that, something as simple as a baby bella, also known as a cremini mushroom, really, really helpful. Portobellos are cool. A lot of times people use those as alternatives to say like burgers and things, but they also do really well as like ribs. So like I've done like portobello mushroom ribs, which are really, really cool. You put them in the oven and kind of roast them and then cut them into strips. And the same thing with oyster mushroom. So that's another mushroom that we've been seeing more readily on the market. That's pretty easy to come by. They have more of a chickeny, I guess, texture is probably the best way to kind of put it. But even if you don't like go for the fried chicken oyster mushroom approach, just sauteing them up nicely, it just changes. So mushrooms have definitely changed. Like I've started growing them during the pandemic, so I've literally become really intimately connected to mushrooms, and there's so many different varieties. But to talk through the ones that are probably most accessible, you're going to want to go with your baby bellas, your portobellos, and your baby bellas, portobellos. Shiitake, you can find those pretty easily too. And you're going to find them dry though. And I will say the cool thing about shiitakes is that when you rehydrate the shiitakes with hot water, so they usually come dry, you're going to put them in some hot water. That hot water that you rehydrate them in can be used as a broth. So that's also something to think about as well, where you can leverage that flavor from the rehydration process and use it in your dishes.
Right. Someone asks, I like mushrooms sauteed in butter and with regular pasta. How would you change this up to make it healthy?
Yeah, so mushrooms don't kill the butter. That's step one when we've transitioned to plant-based. But what's cool about them is that when you slice them and you put them over the pot, like you heat the pot properly, make sure that it's hot, you put them in the pot and you literally don't touch them. You just let them do what they do. They're gonna reduce. There's gonna be some water that kind of comes out of them. They're gonna shrink maybe about at least 25% down. You're gonna check that mushroom and it's gonna be like some brown, some caramelization on it. That's when you know it's time to flip it. Once you flip those mushrooms over, then you can add in whatever seasoning that you were putting on your mushroom. So I know it wasn't just butter. So I like to do garlic as like just kind of a basic garlic, onion powder is kind of and black pepper is like my basic mushroom. And then once it cooks down, I finish it with an acid, which is usually lemon, lime, or white balsamic. And that's become my non-butter, non-salt version of a mushroom. And it's so lovely. And what makes it really lovely is you taking that time to just let them sit in the pan. Don't stir them, don't do anything, because what you want to do is get that caramelization, that golden brown thing that you get from the butter will happen naturally if you just let them sit in the pan.
Wow, that's great. I've been sauteing them, but I'm going to try your method.
Yeah.
Someone asked earlier when you were talking about the meatballs, can you make meatloaf? I think the question meant, can you make meatloaf out of the same recipe and how long to bake?
Yeah, so you can totally make meatloaf. So whatever your meatloaf recipe is, whatever you put into the mix without the egg. So you could literally use oatmeal as the way to kind of bind it together. I personally like to mix chickpeas and lentils when I do meatloaf. It's something about both of them together just to kind of makes a cooler meatloaf. And if I'm going to pick just one, excuse me, it would be lentils over chickpeas. But you could totally do it. Now, how long does it take? I have to look at, actually one of the recipes that I've created. So I have to look at it. I'll let you know, but I want to say it's probably somewhere between like 35 and 40 minutes when you like put it into a loaf pan.
Great. Thank you so much. I think that I don't, oh, one more. When you add oatmeal, I'm assuming it's quick cooking oatmeal. Is that true for the?
Yeah. So,
for
you
the-
could take, if you're going to take the whole grain, like the whole rolled oat, just make sure that you break it up before you put it in, because if you just put the whole in, it doesn't give it the opportunity to act as the breadcrumb and kind of bring it together. So if you have, I always purchase whole oats because it gives me the option to use them whole or to break them up. So depending on your kitchen, that's
And
how
you
to
would
say.
break them up by whizzing them in your Vitamix, or?
You could put it in your blender, but I just usually, when I'm making meatloaf, I just break them up in my hand, like literally as I'm putting them into the bowl.
Okay, and someone asked again, how long to bake the meatballs? And we are going to be sending your recipes to everyone. I just want
Yeah,
everybody
yeah,
to know.
it's no more than 20 minutes, but yes.
Okay.
Did you see the question over that? I can't
Yes,
eat
yes,
okay.
right.
Okay.
Oh, I can't eat avocado, mushrooms, tahini, or asparagus. Is there enough I can compensate with?
Oh, absolutely. Like the plethora of foods that exist in the plant-based space is crazy. And I actually love when I meet people who have like these random allergies. I have friends who have allergies to pineapple and avocado. I have another friend who has a nickel allergy, which is by far one of the most interesting people to cook for as a plant-based person, because nickel is a element that you find in lots of foods, but there's literally so much more, like so much to pick from. Just those 4 things that you unfortunately can enjoy can actually be a fun way to discover things that you probably wouldn't have thought of trying before.
Great. And I think this is the last question. Can you freeze the meatballs? And if so, for how long?
Yes, you can freeze them. And okay, so I've never had them probably longer than about 2.5 months, just because I go through them. So I can safely say about 2.5 months, and I've eaten them at the end of that experience. And once you heat them up in the oven, they're just as good.
Just Elaine, one thing. Does anyone who did not put a question in chat have a question? You can unmute yourself, because not everybody always is able to use chat. Just want to give them that option.
Sure.
Anybody?
I do. I have a question.
Uh-huh.
If you're not fully plant-based yet and you're using like eggs, is egg something that could kind of help with meatloaf and stuff like that, or no? Or do you just like, we don't say the word egg here?
Well, in the plant-based space, the word egg doesn't really exist. But when we're talking about meatloaf, the purpose of the egg in the meatloaf dish is to bind it. So you really don't need it when we're talking about beans that you've kind of smashed up with oats and rice that you're kind of bringing it together with, and all kinds of veggies and stuff. So it's just not needed in this particular form.
Anyone else? Great. Thank you so much, Chef Brandi. Really terrific.
I just wanted to ask one question. I really want to do plant-based, but I want recipes that have tofu. And I want something that tastes good, that's healthy and easy.
I am going to put a note in the chat in a minute or two with our recipe app. And there are all kinds of great whole food plant-based recipes there, and you'll be able to search for an ingredient like tofu.
Okay, thank
Okay, great. So thanks again, Chef Brandi. I want to remind everyone again about the upcoming 4-week Food for Life program, which will feature each week a cooking demonstration of at least 3 delicious and healthful dishes led by one of Plant Power Metro's top cooking instructors, Carol Levy. And each class will also have a video and an interactive discussion about plant-based nutrition. So as I said before, it's a 2-hour program that flies by. Margie will be sending out an email to all of you with the questionnaire that we'll ask you to fill out to register for this particular 4-week series. And we'll also send you the recipes that Chef Brandi prepared today. And I'm just going to put a few links in the chat. This first one is our calendar of coming events, where you can find all kinds of other events, both cooking demos and lectures on various topics. This next one is to join our mailing list. And if you'd like to join our Facebook community, there's the link for that. And you can find previous presentations, cooking demos, and all kinds of talks on our YouTube channel, which I just gave you the link for in the chat. And I think Margie has a few closing words, and while she is doing that, I'm going to find the link to our recipe app that I just mentioned, and I'll add that as well.
Okay, so this, probably later today or early tomorrow morning, you're going to get an email from us that is going to include the video, so you can replay this, everything that you learned today. And it'll include the information on the links. It will include the questionnaire and a reminder that tomorrow, right, Barbara, tomorrow that Maudine is going to be doing, our nutritionist is going to be kind of a very cool lecture, which is the plant-based landscape around the world. So you're going to talk about plant-based eating both here in the United States and in other countries as well. So I think that's going to be really helpful. Anything else, Barbara, from your perspective?
No, I think we're going to be just talking about other things, and we'll be sending out the email reminders, and looking forward to having everybody join us.
So I hope you enjoyed today. It was wonderful. Thank you, Chef Brandi. And we can't see her right now, but she was really very inspirational. She was great. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, all of you, for coming. And like I already did my questionnaire. I'm on the same road that you guys are on. I'm probably in a worse place than the rest of you are. I'm sure that Plant Powered New York will faint when they see the answers to my to their questions, but it's a journey, and hopefully you guys will stay on it with us. So thank you very much, and we will see you next week, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Same place, same station. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Great.
Bye.